Hey, what's up, everybody? We have a new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe right now. Leave a comment on the video. Share it with your friends. It's also a podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you listen with me, John Middlekauff, Apple, Spotify. We have you covered, as well as thevolume.com. We have merch. Check out. I got 3 and Out hats right now. Thevolume.com. Search the podcast. Buy some merch. Okay, back at it again. And last night when we finished recording after the Eagles implosion, it was reported that Jason Kelce had told teammates that he was going to retire. And I was there when Kelce was drafted. I've obviously followed, like most people, his career closely this last half decade as he's become, one of the stalwarts and stars of the league. So wanted to touch on that. John Schneider, the Seattle general manager, spoke today, and I think he kind of let the cat out of the bag of what has been going on there and what's going to go on in the future. And then I just looked at the quarterbacks. It really is pretty fascinating. The 8 guys left. We have 7 first-rounders in Purdy, and I think it teaches a good lesson here. So we'll dive into some of that, and it's a big week. A lot on the line, right? I mean, a lot of pressure on teams. Definitely the Niners and the Ravens. Must-win territory. Enormous favorites. Can Detroit win 2 playoff games? Can Houston keep the magic going? Chiefs, Bills, doesn't get any better. Manning, Brady, the new version with Allen and Mahomes. Remember, it took a long time for Peyton to beat Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. And he finally did it in 2006 at home. Marlon Jackson, I think, had the game-sealing interception and then went on to win the Super Bowl when they played who did they play in the Super Bowl? The Saints? The Bears? They played the Bears. They lost to the Saints a couple years later. So we will dive into football talk. But first, got to tell you about, listen, if you want to go to one of these playoff games, I've been to countless playoff games. I've been to AFC championships. Never been to AFC championship. Been to NFC championship games, NFC divisional rounds, the Super Bowl. There's nothing like a playoff game. What's on the line at any moment? It can go the wrong way if you're rooting for a team because the season, there is no tomorrow. So if you get the opportunity, you live in one of these cities, you want to travel to one of these cities to watch the game, my friends at Gametime, download Gametime, the official ticketing app of this podcast. Use the promo code JOHN, JOHN, JOHN for $20 off your first pair of tickets. Very, very easy to do. Promo code JOHN, $20 off anything. Concerts, comedy shows, you name it, they have you covered. Promo code JOHN, JOHN, Gametime. Download that app now. Football, basketball, baseball's right around the corner. You want to come to Arizona Scottsdale for spring training? I got you covered. Gametime, promo code JOHN. Let's dive into Jason Kelce because obviously with his stardom of his brother, his booming podcast, I think he's become infinitely more famous the last couple of years. His Super Bowl speech in the Mummers outfit became something of legend, not just in Philadelphia area, but I think it's one of the great all-time, championship level speeches. It's just something that will be talked about when any championship parade happens forever. And I think Jason Kelce represents something that's very important for sports fans. And when I was a kid, the 49ers were fucking huge. Growing up in the early 90s. I was born in the mid-'80s, but I remember football in the early 90s. And all their players felt like pieces of the community. And then a lot of them stayed around the community. Like Joe Montana lives in San Francisco. Steve Young lives in Palo Alto. Until a couple years ago, Brent Jones lived in that area. Jerry Rice goes to all the games. So when you thought about the 49ers, you didn't just think about like pro athletes. You thought as like members of Northern California, people that might eat somewhere you eat, might take their kids somewhere where you would go as a kid, like Six Flags or, wherever. And I think there's a relatability to that. And when you get that in a team captain, in one of your best players, in one of the most important players in franchise history, I think the connection of the fan base, the sports fan, and that player / that team goes to another level. Like when you close your eyes, you think about the Patriot dynasty. Like Belichick was going to all those other games. He became really good friends with Danny Ainge and going to Red Sox games, and Brady and Julian Edelman becoming such big parts of the community. Like that's powerful. That is something that means a lot to the people that, I don't know, pay the bills, which is us. And to me, Jason Kelce, I didn't know that much about the Eagles when I got hired there. Obviously, I knew who Andy Reid was, Deshaun Jackson, McNabb, Michael Vick and stuff. But I didn't know much about the city. I was a guy that had spent, beside 4 months when I interned for the Kansas City Chiefs, 99% of my life either in Davis, Sacramento area, Fresno, California, or San Luis Obispo in the central part of California. I was a lifelong West Coast California kid. And I remember going to Philadelphia thinking, listen, it's a little cold, but there was a passion to those people when it came to the football team that was very relatable. Growing up, the 49, it just didn't get any bigger. And when I went to Philadelphia, the passion of Eagles fans, it's like everyone makes a big deal of pelting Santa with a snowball, or last night screaming for Nick Sirianni to get fired. What do you want out of your fans? To not care? Like, wait, they should be saying, hey, Nick, good job, man. Can't wait for you to try it again next year. Fuck that. Even Lane Johnson, who I think is in the Jason Kelce mold of like, yeah, everything's on the table. He knows. He's not dumb. This isn't acceptable. With the best organizations, the organizations whose standard is, competing for championships, or it's a complete failure, stuff like that is not cool. It's not like, yeah, it's okay. Everything's going to be all right. And obviously people in Philadelphia are a little edgier, but I think Jason Kelce represented his team as well as any player in recent memory. Obviously it's hard to beat Brady and the Pats, and just kind of his mindset and work ethic and toughness of representing the Boston people. But to bring a Super Bowl for the first time in franchise history, to wear that outfit, and honestly, I went to the Mummers Parade one time. I don't even quite know what it is. They have these historic things that happen in a city that's been around forever that just means a lot to people that have been there for a long period of time. Right? When I lived in the Bay Area, I would meet people constantly that had moved there 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Now that I live in Scottsdale, meet people all the time that, yeah, I'm from Jersey, I'm from Pennsylvania, I'm from Minnesota, moved here 5 years ago, moved here 7 years ago. You meet people from all over the place. I'm a Vikings fan. I'm a big Eagle fan. Huge University of Texas fan. When you live in Philadelphia, you meet people from Philadelphia that are born and raised generations. And the Birds, AKA the Eagles, are easily the number one team in that town. And it's an elite sports town. The hockey team means a lot. The Phillies mean a lot. But the Eagles are on a completely different level. And to have Jason Kelce, a center, when we drafted him, he was an undersized player. He was a guy that Howard Mudd pounded the table for and said, this guy can play in the league. And he immediately beat out, I forget the center's name, and became a starter as a rookie. And then early on in his career, Jason was a little bit of a wild child. Like I remember, I'm a couple years older than him, like partied pretty hard. And listen, that's not an aberration for young people in pro sports or life. But clearly the second half of his career, you saw a guy, the other thing, like met his wife on Tinder. You know what that is? Pretty relatable to my generation. A lot of people I know met their wives on dating apps. For a brother who's dating like the Michael Jackson of musicians right now, right, in Taylor Swift, and who couldn't be any more famous off the field, Jason has like this blue collar, beer drinking, tough guy attitude. I'm just one of the guys. You could see me eating a sandwich or drinking a beer with the the local dude at the 202 Union on a Thursday afternoon when I'm retired. Like that is foreseeable. And that represents the city. And I think anytime you get a player who just fits the region and who feels like Jason Kelce is going to live with the Eagles. If you told me think about John Elway. John Elway went to Denver, ultimately came back and ran the Denver Broncos, and just feels like that area represents, like him and John Elway parallel each other. Like they're on the same page with each other. maybe a little more intellectual, John Elway, Stanford guy, rich businessman, wheeler and dealer. Maybe it fits that community. To me, Jason Kelce fits the Eagles community. And it's a sad day because obviously he's still a really, really good player, but you don't replace that. Like you don't, there's no way, let's just draft the center or let's just move this guy over. It'll never be the same. You don't replace a player who's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, especially not just because with his play, but because of the standard in which he mandates to everyone playing around him. If you ever get a chance, if you want to nerd out, which is a fantastic podcast, Travis and Jason on the New Heights podcast had on Jordan Mailata, who was drafted in the 7th round, who's now, their left tackle from Australia. Just a fantastic podcast because they kind of get nerdy on football. And Jordan talks about first getting there and watching Kelce and Stoutland, the offensive line coach. He's like, it's like they were speaking Chinese. I had no clue what was going on and what he represented in that offensive line room, the leadership he showed between the transition of the Wentz and Jalen Hurts transition and how much he believed in Jalen, how much he supported the coaching staff with Nick Sirianni. It's a huge blow. And it doesn't feel like, in years past, they did a lot of convincing him, almost begging him to stay. It wouldn't shock me if he immediately goes into the front office and is one day the general manager, for the Philadelphia Eagles in 10, 15 years, right? And I think anytime you get a guy that is not just one of yours, he's only played for your team, but is never leaving the region, is staying with you. The Lakers had that with Kobe, right? They have that with Jason Kelce. The Patriots don't even have that with Tom because he was booted and he's never living in Boston again. So it's a pretty special relationship that we don't see very often in sports now. And this is going to sound negative, but the mercenary nature of the transactions. Like you got to go when the money's hot and when you're a free agent, you use your leverage. Sometimes you get traded when new coaches come in. And Kelce has lasted through a lot of coaches, from Andy Reid to Chip Kelly to Doug Peterson to Nick Sirianni. And it doesn't look like he's going to see Belichick or Vrabel. That was a joke, but maybe not. And so hat tip to you, Jason, because it was a fantastic player to watch. You represent everything I like about football. And I think you also represent not just Philadelphia, but why football resonates with so many people in this country and why it has lapped all the other sports and become the behemoth that it has. Because guys like him, just very relatable, despite being super rich, despite making, $10+ million for many years now. He feels like a guy that we all know. And that's one thing that the NFL still has. They have a relatability even with their players. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official betting partner of the NFL playoffs, is bringing you an offer to help make the playoffs electrifying. New customers can bet $5 on any game and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook now and use code JOHN. New customers can bet $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN John. The crown is yours. John Schneider talked today, and he basically admitted what we talk about a lot. Most GMs in this modern day football are not in control. They're not the highest guy in the food chain because why? Well, their coach makes triple them. If you make $5 million and you work for a $15 million coach, who do you think's in charge? Right? The coach, there's probably not an organization in the NFL that the coach doesn't make more than the GM. The Eagles might have been the rare one with Sirianni, who probably makes $7-8 million, and Howie might make 10. But most teams, even though they have a quote-unquote GM, if the coach wants something, Shanahan, McVay, Andy, again, these people have very, very good relationships with their general manager and often compromise and give in and let them run stuff. But they are the boss. And the GMs will admit this definitely off the record. Well, John Schneider told you, I had no control over the coaching staff. I did not control the roster. Now, I influenced it. Pete listened to me, and this goes back to Russell Wilson when he pounded the table. Obviously, Pete let him draft players in recent memory. It's why their team's pretty talented. But John was not the power broker in that building. Pete Carroll was. Because back to what I was just saying, Pete Carroll was making like $18 million. You think John Schneider, who's, let's just guess, making 6 or 7, has more pull than him? In what business does that take shape? There is not an organization that's a billion-dollar business where the guy making double, triple the other guy ever answers to that guy. That's not the way it works. Now, it doesn't mean that John Schneider might not hire a coach that's now making more than him, but he did admit, I now run personnel. I now get say over the coaching staff. And this is a somewhat of a dying breed and a dying, I would say, job description in the National Football League. So John Schneider now, Pete Carroll's a legend in Seattle. He resurrected the program. He not only made them relevant, but won a Super Bowl and just kept them winning year in, year out. And now proved that, like, it wasn't all Russell Wilson. Shipped him out of town, and I won 18 games. Now, we didn't make the playoffs the second time, and we barely made it the first time, but we were very, very competitive both years when we traded Russell Wilson. And we kind of reset the franchise and put ourselves in a position to be competitive moving forward. But it was time. And I think John Schneider now has the opportunity to kind of really put his stamp on this organization. Gutekunst was given the same, right? When they transitioned from Ted Thompson and Mike McCarthy and kind of that era, and Brian Gutekunst was named the GM. And then he hired Matt LaFleur, and they traded up to get Jordan Love. And now you're looking at, and I'm not trying to jump the shark here because we got a long way to go. Sustaining success in pro sports is really, really hard. We saw Blake Bortles and the Jags have an anomaly year, get to the AFC Championship game. But I think it's fair to say this organization, the structure, their history, you would bet on the Packers like not going away. Well, if Jordan Love is just a consistent Pro Bowler moving forward, and you drafted him and you hired LaFleur, guess what? You become a pretty legendary general manager in that organization. And I think John Schneider has that opportunity now. And he comes from Green Bay originally with that mindset where the GM still has a lot of juice, has a lot of pull. So I'm fascinated to watch who they hire, right? And I think he's got to be very careful. I just wouldn't go back fishing from the Pete Carroll tree. I wouldn't touch Dan Quinn with a 10-foot pole. Not because I don't like him, not because I'm even overreacting to the Packer game. Like, let's start fresh. Let's not bring in some of, like, anything connected to Pete. I think this is a good opportunity to just hire the best coach available. Look at Alabama, right? They're replacing Nick Saban, who even relative to the program is infinitely more important than Pete Carroll. And it would have been pretty easy to be like, let's do whatever we have to do to hire a former Nick Saban guy who's having success. Let's make an offer where Steve Sarkisian can't say no. Lane Kiffin, whoever. And they went and got Kalen DuBois. Why? Because he's really good. He knows what he's doing. And his style is completely different than Nick. He has no ties to Nick Saban. But you feel pretty good, like, yeah, he's probably going to win. He's probably going to be pretty successful. He immediately brings his offensive coordinator that Nick Saban tried to hire last year. Like, I got news for you. It's going to work. Hell, if Nick Saban, they just pay him to recruit a little bit. So DuBois, I don't know how great of a recruiter he is, but the school is going to recruit itself for at least the foreseeable future. If I'm John Schneider, I do not honestly, I try to avoid it. I really do. And I just try to hire the best coach possible. And Dan Quinn to me is not that guy. And luckily you have an organization that's willing to pay. And I'm fascinated to watch this because it's hard, right? The Niners are rolling. They're going nowhere. The Rams are on the come. And the Arizona Cardinals, despite having a lot of questions and a lot of holes in their organization, they're just always feisty. They just play the other three teams just consistently. They're a problem, right? So it's a very, very difficult division, but I'm rooting for John Schneider. I've always defended him. Defending him is that's the wrong way to put it. I've always just said, I think he's one of the best general managers, in the league. Well, now he gets his chance to really validate that because you hire the right coach, you start winning again, taking this team to the playoffs, draft a quarterback. No one can ever say shit. Let's look at the quarterbacks because it's a pretty fascinating group, right? You got Goff versus Baker. You got Purdy versus Love. You got the marquee matchup, the modern day. When I say modern day, they were the modern day. The ultra modern day, Manning, Brady in Allen versus Mahomes, and CJ Stroud versus Lamar Jackson. And the crazy thing is 7 of the 8 of these guys are first-round picks. And beside Lamar, 6 of them are, I guess Jordan Love's in the 20s. I mean, Goff and Baker were number 1 overall. Josh Allen was the 7th with like a 30% completion percentage in college. Patrick Mahomes was 10, and CJ Stroud was 2. So, I mean, there's a lot of premium draft capital invested in these individuals. And Jordan Love, I mean, one of the more controversial picks of all time. And Lamar, clearly, if you redo that draft, Josh Allen goes 1, he goes 2. And then it's like, we'll figure it out from there. But that was him going 32 is crazier than even Purdy going 7th round, because everyone was like, wait, this guy won the Heisman. He's pretty fucking good. And immediately validated it like 2 years in when he wins the most valuable player. But I think all these guys represent something. And especially Baker and Jared Goff, 2 guys that one dude played in a Super Bowl. Like, one guy was the quarterback for a team that consistently won and got to a Super Bowl. And if it wasn't for one of the great defensive game plans of all time, Flores, Bill Belichick, just punking Sean McVay, which would be harder in 2024 than then, but they did it. You know, who knows? Because I don't think Sean McVay ever looked at him the same. And the Baker stuff, Odell Beckham kind of falls apart. The dude won a playoff game, beat the fucking Pittsburgh Steelers with the Cleveland Browns, and they ran him out of town. And then he went to Carolina. It got weird. But both those 2 guys, obviously Josh, Mahomes, CJ, Lamar, even Love and Purdy, they all have people that believe in them behind them. And they all come different shapes, sizes, different price points. But I think the power of belief in a coach, in someone you work with, in your parents is so important. I mean, the way Dan Campbell talks about and supports Jared Goff is the complete opposite of the way it ended with Sean McVay. I've been in, different spots in my career where it was clear, like, this is probably not going to go well for me, and people just stop supporting you. And you start losing your self-confidence. I don't care if you're a scout, you're a radio host, you're a quarterback, you're a car salesman. When the guy you work for or the leader of your company / business doesn't show you support, you don't feel like they have confidence in you, we're all human beings. You're going to naturally lose it. When they believe in you, D'Amico says over and over, now he's justifying it, but this team goes as far as this guy takes us. This guy is the reason we're here. Like, you don't think that confidence CJ gets from his head coach matters? You think it's all, it's just natural talent. He's just dominating. He would do it no matter what. Bullshit. Andy Reid, the support that he has behind Patrick Mahomes, good game, bad game. Same thing with Josh. That organization, that city, the belief. Now, a lot of this is earned, but like this offseason, I'll never forget. I call them the Twitter gutter rats. There was a segment of 49er fans who thought that Brock Purdy should not be the quarterback. They thought the quarterback position should be handed back to Trey Lance and Purdy should be the backup, and they should cut Sam Darnold. Again, these people are fucking imbeciles, and they were morons at the time. But Kyle Shanahan was getting asked about this a lot during training camp and never wavered. Never wavered once. All in on Purdy. And what did it lead them to do? Be the number 1 seed. And for a guy that was the last pick in the draft to be just in the most valuable player mix. It's fucking incredible accomplishment for the last pick to pick 262. And Baker had to call Tampa Bay. Hey, Jason, I think this would be a great spot. Tampa didn't reach out to him. He called Jason Light, or his agent did. Like, hey, I'm really interested in coming there. And then he gets there, and they have nothing but belief in him. And they support him. And listen, for the most part, if you're going to get a good quarterback, you usually have to draft him high. There are outliers. You can find starting quarterbacks in different rounds. You might have opportunities to trade for guys. But in the history of the league, most of the best players have been first-round picks. Now, not all number 1 picks, but when I just start listing off names, they've been drafted in the first round, right? Peyton Manning, John Elway, Dan Marino, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, CJ Stroud. Like, you go through the league right now, Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning, Joe Flacco. I mean, all these guys won Super Bowls. It doesn't mean I can't find solid players. Listen, everyone's shitting on Dak, rightfully so. He had a terrible game. But you can find a guy like that 3rd, 4th round. Kirk Cousins, same thing. Jimmy Garoppolo, 2nd round. Derek Carr, 2nd round. You can find starters in other rounds. But in the history of the league, they usually have to be high. But no matter what, one thing that will never change, whether, it's the guy you draft number 2 overall or the guy you take in the 5th round. When you believe in that player and that player believes that you believe in them at the quarterback position, because there's a lot going on. Because for him to know he's got belief in people above him, everyone on that team is looking at him. So he can't afford to not be confident. If he's not confident, your team has no shot. None. Zero. It's what I never understood about Trubisky. You're watching a guy, he's not confident. He has no confidence. You watch Mason Rudolph, you go, listen, I don't know how good he is, but he definitely shows some confidence on the field. Matt Stafford, he knows that organization has nothing but belief in his abilities. So, and then he plays like that and everyone rallies behind him. And I just think that this group represents, especially the NFC, because the NFC is unlike the AFC. The AFC is, Josh Allen and Mahomes was like $800 million with a quarterback. Lamar signed a $250 million quarterback, saved Harbaugh's ass. And CJ Stroud, the number 2 pick in the draft, is a rocket ship. But this other group's pretty fascinating. Goff, Baker, Purdy, Love. You could argue the 2 groups are a little different, but I do think the support doesn't change. Whether it's Peyton Manning talking with Bruce Arians and the belief that Bruce Arians showed in him that when he was so terrible his rookie year and Bruce never pulled him out of the game. So the only way you're going to learn is through your failures. And Peyton said that really benefited me the next couple years as we got it turned around. And no different than Jordan Love. Like that organization, it felt like they were wavering a little bit. Now he wasn't playing that well, but the moment he showed some signs of life, they pushed all their chips in the middle of the table on the guy. I think Jared Goff's probably the best example because I can't get over, you never see this happen. Listen, I say this all the time about coaches and GMs, especially when they get mad at me, like, you're just a shit talker. Everything I say is on the record. Every single thing I say is here on a podcast. I'm saying it literally publicly. I talk shit just as much as you guys do. The difference of me and you is everything, it has my name on it. You're constantly leaking shit anonymously. That's being a coward. Now, I understand why you do it. You can't run a team by putting your name on it, but let's not act like we're the same. Because I've been around coaches, I've been around GMs. They're crushing everyone constantly. And you're constantly questioning your group, your quarterback, players. But when you believe in them, it's a really, really powerful thing. And what Sean McVay did, and he even apologized for it. He said that I probably crossed the line. Because I did think he crossed the line on Jared Goff. Now, he wasn't playing well, but you don't publicly talk like me. Like, that's tough. And luckily, they were able to pivot. It was a win-win for everyone. But that had to be, and Jared, is a mild-mannered, kind of surfer vibe from Marin. It's not Belichick or Brady that would have double middle fingers up, but that had to feel pretty good. It's one thing to win it for the city. It's another thing to win it against a guy that told you basically you're not any good. I don't want you here. I want to get rid of you. So, yeah, man, this is going to be a fun weekend.